Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you're all doing well, and thank you for joining us on this session of OECD Tax and Development Days and Developing Country Perspectives on the two-pillar solution. And we have a very good panel today, and perspectives from different areas. Thank you. I see we have almost 700 people already in the room. We're going to get going right away because there's lots to cover. I'm Andrew Auerbach of the OECD and the Global Relations and Development Division, working in the area, supporting developing countries on implementing the BEPS work on base erosion and profit shifting, and helping countries protect their corporate tax base. So just to set the scene a little bit for everybody, I want to just explain a little bit what is the two-pillar solution and where are we in terms of implementation. And very simply, the two-pillar solution refers to the solution to address the tax challenges arising from the digitalization of the economy. And this comes from the reality that the international tax rules, which were developed really about 100 years ago, no longer really fit the purpose for which they were intended. Radical changes in the global economy had led to the fact that the rules weren't working the way they were intended. And the two-pillar solution is a multilateral attempt to provide fair taxation and to bring stability to the international tax system. So what is it? Well, it's two pillars. You see there on the screen a little bit what the problems that each of these pillars is trying to address, and how they go about it. So pillar one basically addresses the issue that under current rules, multinational enterprises often don't pay tax in many of the markets where their users and customers are located. The new economy has generated the circumstances where companies can have a huge economic impact in a jurisdiction, economic presence, without attracting any rights of that market to tax those profits. So amount A of Pillar 1 aims to allow countries create a new taxing right over the largest and most profitable multinationals based on the revenue they generate in that country. So where there's a market that's the place of a lot of economic activity for a company, it gives a right to tax part of that profit. Amount B addresses a circumstance, particularly for low capacity countries, developing countries, where they encounter difficulties applying transfer pricing rules to certain types of transactions. Transfer pricing is essentially a set of rules governing those transactions that a multinational enterprise enters into between its affiliates, between intergroup transactions, and often the prices that they attach to those transactions don't necessarily reflect reality. And so the transfer pricing rules aim to get there, but it's an extremely complex area. It's one that requires very specific skills. It's one that takes a lot of resources, and low capacity countries often have difficulty managing that process. And so Amount B aims to simplify transfer pricing specifically for a certain type of transactions for which that's a formulaic approach is possible, allowing countries to more easily resolve those situations, to avoid disputes, and to devote their transfer pricing skills, audit skills, to other more complicated cases. Pillar 2, on the other side of the two-pillar solution, is really about a minimum level of tax. And the problem essentially is that multinational enterprises are able to shift profits to low tax jurisdictions. And this impacts the tax bases of all jurisdictions, and disproportionately those of developing countries. The global rules provide a way to ensure that all multinationals pay a minimum level of tax, 15%, regardless of how they structure their affairs, regardless of where they shift profit to, or how they organize themselves. Finally, there's the subject to tax rule, which is aimed at cross-border intra-group payments that take advantage of low nominal corporate income tax rates, and that can present significant risks to developing countries. And so the subject to tax rule is something that goes in treaties and says that if you're making this pay, if a developing country is the source of a payment that's subject to a low rate, it restores the taxing right to a minimum of 9%. So this is a group of rules that provide a comprehensive solution to these tax challenges of the digitalization of the economy, negotiated by the Inclusive Framework, 147 members, most of, or almost half of which are developing countries, which have had a very, very active role in those negotiations, and much of what you see in front of you is there to address developing country concerns. So there's a lot in the two-pillar solution for developing countries, and it's imperative that they have the support they need to ensure they benefit from those provisions. So where are we in terms of the implementation? Well, we have Amount A. The text of a multilateral convention has been agreed, but there are still some questions within the inclusive framework about how to finalize that, and so that is, as of yet, not quite finalized. Amount B, however, is incorporated in the OECD transfer pricing guidelines, and it is there for developing countries to implement as they wish. The OECD transfer pricing guidelines are a long-standing flagship product of the OECD, around for a long time and used by not just OECD countries, but many countries, including many developing countries, to provide a comprehensive and consistent approach to transfer pricing. For the global minimum tax, more than 50 countries have implemented or in the process of implementing, including 10 developing countries, have enacted global minimum tax legislation. And finally, the subject to tax rule. We have developed we have the rule itself is complete and finalized and agreed by the inclusive framework. So it's there for developing countries to implement in their bilateral tax treaties. But we've also developed a multilateral instrument that allows countries to implement the rule effectively and efficiently within many of their treaties with one signature. We have 9 jurisdictions that have signed that multilateral instrument in September, including 6 developing countries and more that have signed a letter of intent to do so. So there is already uptake of the subject to tax rule. We have a good panel today. I'm going to turn it back to Heike to take us through the rest of the session. I just want to quickly thank our donors who have supported the tax and development work at the OECD, and for whom this 2 days is really a testament to their support for the work we do in this area. So thank you very much to them. Thank you very much to everybody who's joined us today, and to the panelists who will share their experiences. So with that, thank you, and Heike, I give it to you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Hello, everybody. Yeah, my name is Heike Buss, and I work as a tax advisor together with Andrew in the Global Relations and Development Division of OECD's Center for Tax Policy and Administration. I am pleased to moderate today this panel discussion on the implementation of the two-pillar solution by developing countries. And I'm very glad to have 5 very distinguished panelists from around the world with me today. So I already see Melanie here on the screen, so I hope that the others will also be shown on the screen. I think it takes a bit of time. So first of all, I would like to introduce Melanie Dewi Astuti, who is from Indonesia, and she is a senior international tax and fiscal policy analyst within the Ministry of Finance in Indonesia. Then I also see Mercy here on the screen. So Mercy is from the African Tax Administration Forum, and I'm very pleased to welcome Mercy. Mercy works as a transfer pricing expert in the international tax unit of the African Tax Administration Forum. Now I also see our colleague Dr. Nia Zebong, who is also from the African Tax Administration Forum. And as you all know, the African Tax Administration Forum, or ATAF, provides an important platform for cooperation among African tax authorities and is a really important partner to our work. So I'm very pleased to welcome the two colleagues from ATAF. Then we also have with us today Mr. Jorge Santa Cruz Gutierrez, who is from Mexico. And he is the Deputy Transfer Pricing Control Administrator in the Tax Administration Service, SAT, in Mexico. And last but not least, we have Mr. Alain Eude Assan-Masso from Benin with us. Bienvenue, Monsieur Assan-Masso.
Welcome
And
to Mr. Assan-Masso
is tax administrator in the Directorate General of Taxation of Benin. So the objective of this panel is to share perspectives on the implementation of the two-pillar solution, to hear what might be challenges in the implementation, which are areas where countries might need support. And so in this first round, the panelists will make opening statements of 5 minutes. And since we have some time constraints, I will kindly remind the panelists to stay within the 5 minutes. So first of all, I would like to turn to Mr. Alain Eude Assan-Masso from Benin. And I will speak in French. So for those who need the interpretation, please choose the channel on the bottom of the Zoom interface. Monsieur Alain Eude Assan-Masso.
Mr. Alain Eude Assan-Masso, thank you very much for being here with us. We are delighted that you're able to participate in, and the very active participation of Benin in our recent endeavors, especially in the implementation of the second pillar of the two-pillar solution. You are currently participating in a series of multilateral workshops on the global minimum tax for a small number of French-speaking countries on the African continent. Dr. Zivang was also a participant of the series of multilateral workshops, and Benin also signed the STTR-MLI, the multilateral instrument on the subject to tax rule, the STTR, when you came to Paris in last September for the high-level signing ceremony that your Minister of Finance was able to partake in. I'm quite curious. I would like to know what the discussions have been like in your government, and also were there any challenges, were there any difficulties, and how were you able to overcome the different challenges that you were faced with? Thank you very much. I would like to thank you for giving me the opportunity so that we can talk about international taxation, especially when it comes to the first and second pillars of the two-pillar solution. Our country was recently able to partake in a series of workshops, as you mentioned, workshops are organized by the OECD on the global minimum tax. We found the workshops to be very enriching, very resourceful, because the information that was provided was of paramount importance for our country.
avant les séries d'ateliers,
Prior to
c'était de
participating
mieux
in the
comprendre
series of workshops, our objective was really
les
to
règles
better
d'établissement de l'impôt
understand
minimum
the
et de
subject to
voir les
tax rule
chances pour notre pays
and to understand how this would be beneficial for
de
our country.
participer ou bien
We wanted to
d'avoir accès, les chances pour notre pays
also
d'avoir accès à cet impôt minimum.
be part of
En effet,
the global
dans notre
minimum
programme
tax.
d'élargissement d'assiette fiscale, toutes les sources
Thanks to our program,
pouvant permettre à notre pays
we have been able to use different resources
d'engranger des
in
ressources
order
ne sont
to
pas
allow
négligées.
our country to better deal with this issue.
Ainsi, si les réformes peuvent permettre à
Therefore,
notre pays
if reforms that we have undertaken would also help other countries
des
to
revenus, d'avoir un complément
increase
d'impôt
their
de
tax
part et d'autre,
revenue, to have complementary revenue coming
nous,
from
on a
tax
saisi,
collection,
on doit saisir cette chance-là
we
et
would like to
de
encourage them
pouvoir
to take the
adhérer à ces
opportunity to
réformes.
do so and to undertake the same reforms.
Dans cette logique aussi que
It is within this
nous
rationale
avons signé
that we
la RAI,
signed
l'instrument
the
multilatéral sur la règle d'assujettissement à l'impôt.
STTR, the subject to tax rule.
Avant de la signature de cet instrument multilatéral,
Prior
nous
to the
avons
multilateral instrument
mené
being
des réflexions, nous avons
implemented,
étudié des
we
possibilités pour notre
tried
pays
to look at different
de
possibilities for
voir,
our country to
si ça nous arrange d'essayer
find the
l'instrument
fit
multilatéral.
that worked best for
Et des
us.
discussions que nous avons menées,
We were able
c'est que
to partake in many different
la
discussions,
RAI sur la règle d'assujettissement à
and we
l'impôt nous
understood that
permet
the
de
STTR, the
corriger
subject to
les
tax
conventions
rule,
qu'on avait signées
was the
antérieurement
one that was
et qui
best,
contenaient des
that would be the
insuffisances.
best integrated with
Et
tax
quand on
treaties
a
already
fait un peu le
signed.
point, nous n'avons pas un réseau conventionnel très grand, mais quand on a fait un
When
peu
we were able to take
le
stock
point
of the situation
de ces conventions que nous avons
with the
avons
tax
un
treaties
peu qui
signed,
tombe dans le champ d'application de la RAI.
we realized
Donc,
that
les
most of
discussions
them fell
nous
within the
conduisent
scope of the STTR.
à accepter aller à la RAI et espérer que nos partenaires conventionnels
We
aussi puissent
also wanted
signer
to ensure
la règle,
that our treaty
l'instrument
partners
multilatéral sur
would
la règle
also
d'assujettissement
be
à l'impôt
privy to the
afin
MLI,
que nous puissions corriger un peu
so that we're able to correct
des conventions que nous avons
some of the tax
déjà signées
treaties
ou des
that
conventions
were
qui
signed,
seront signées et qui vont comporter
but
ces
also apply this
insuffisances,
rule
et
to
surtout sur les
treaties that
revenus
will be
passifs, à
signed in the
savoir
future,
les intérêts et les redevances.
especially when
Donc,
it
c'est un
comes
peu
to
ça
collecting
qui nous a
royalties and
motivés
interest.
à,
In a
à
nutshell,
proposer
that's what
à notre
we
ministre des
have put
Finances
forward, and
et
that's what
sur
we did put
la règle
forward to
d'assujettissement, la
our
convention
Ministry
multilatérale
of
sur la règle
Finance
d'assujettissement à
for the
l'impôt.
STTR, the
Cela,
subject to tax rule.
c'est ce qui a été fait.
And this is what was done in Benin. Thank you.
Merci.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur
Thank you very
Alain
much, Mr. Alain
de nous avoir partagé les
Azamasu. Thank you
perspectives et
very much for
l'expérience
sharing
du
your
Bénin. C'était
perspective and
très
Benan's
intéressant pour nous et c'est
experience. It was very interesting
très
to listen to
impressionnant
you,
que le
and it's
travail que
also
le
very impressive
Bénin
to see
a
the
pu
work
faire
that
dans une
Benin has
courte
been able to
période.
done, been
Et
able
donc,
to
je
do
les
rather in
remercie
such a short
beaucoup
period of time.
pour votre
Thank you very
implication
much. Thank you very much for your
dans nos
involvement
travaux.
in our works.
Merci encore.
Thank you. Thank you once
So
again.
now I will turn to, so now we have heard from a bit like the African perspective, and now we come to the Latin American perspective. So I turn to Jorge Santa Cruz Gutierrez from Mexico. So Mr. Gutierrez is also a delegate to our Working Party 6 on transfer pricing, and he's working in the large taxpayers unit. So we are really interested in your perspectives on Amount B, because Mexico has been very active alongside with ATAF in the development of the Amount B, and you have already committed to implement Amount B, and therefore I would be interested to know what you think, which impact Amount B will have on Mexico's approach to transfer pricing, and what you think how Amount B will impact on your allocation of resources for large taxpayers.
Thank you, Heike. Good morning and good evening to everyone. We view the future of transfer pricing as one with more simplification measures or simplified approaches. Mexico has experience with simplification measures, and this is why we aimed at having the most active participation as possible in the Amount B project. Our previous experience with simplification measures relates to a simplification measure for a specific industry sector, the qualified maquiladora approach for maquiladoras. This approach applies a predetermined formula, and depending on the levels of certain parameters, be it asset intensity or expense intensity, and also relies on a predetermined sets of comparables. And this approach deals both with the arm's length character of the contract manufacturing transaction, as well as with the permanent establishment status of the US principal. And this has had positive results in tax certainty and tax collection. As such, our approach for transfer pricing is intended to be centered around efficiency and simplification where appropriate in the transfer pricing regime, as well as optimization of the tax authorities' limited resources, which we are convinced Amount B will fit within those spheres. Regarding the impact of Amount B, at the beginning of the project, we roughly estimated the quantum of potential cases to be around the low part of a three-digit figure. Currently, these distribution structures cases absorb a considerable amount of resources throughout the entire audit cycle, this being the risk assessment stage, the audit, appeals, and last, the MAP process. With Amount B, it is estimated that the compounded effect of all the man-hour in the audit cycle can be reduced significantly. Consequently, the resource differential can be allocated to more complex cases within the large taxpayers division. And also, three side effects are foreseeable. One, I already mentioned the resource efficiency. Two, positive effect on tax collection. And three, a reputational effect from the tax certainty provided of the approach and positive externalities for the tax administration due to the implementation of Amount B. Thank you, Heike.
Thank you very much for sharing your insights, very interesting perspectives. I'm now turning to the African Tax Administration Forum. So we have with us Dr. Zebong, who is a tax audit specialist, and also Mercy, who is also a transfer pricing expert. And so I would like to know a little bit more from you about ETAF's work on the components of the two-pillar solution, since ETAF has been quite involved. And also I would be curious to know what is the sense you get from your membership on the areas where countries would need the most support in the implementation of the two-pillar solution. So I believe that Dr. Zebong is more specialized on the global minimum tax, because he was also working with us on the workshops for the French-speaking countries. So please take the floor, Mr. Zebong.
Okay, thank you very much, Heike, and greetings to all the participants. I'll address the GMT and leave it to my colleague Mercy to talk on Amount B and the STTR. So on the question of work that ETAF has been doing regarding the GMT, I'll note first of all that we consider the GMT as an important development in the international tax space. And then also to know that at our level, we've always considered the ordering of the global rules, that is the IIR, which is the primary rule, and the UTPR, which is the backstop rule, as favoring residence countries to the detriment of source countries. This is simply because most of our members are source countries, with very few, if any, MNEs that meet the annual consolidated revenue threshold of 750 million euros. That is required, for the IIR to apply. This in effect means that few African countries relying on the first ordering of the rules are able to capture any of the top-up tax that is going to be generated by the global rules. And this is one of the reasons why we at ETAF argued, although unsuccessfully, that the order of the rules be reversed to give priority to the UPTR. Of course, that did not happen. But we were also comforted by the fact that you have the QD MTT that was adopted, and that provides immense potential to African countries to capture the top-up tax, notably in cases where the shortfall of the 15% ETR is caused by tax incentives granted by the country. Now, on the question of areas where ETAF member countries need support in implementing the two-pillar solution, these are varied, but we see the QDMTT as a good example of an area where support is needed. And at this level, we've noticed that the main challenge is in, first of all, understanding the rules, and then secondly, incorporating those rules into domestic laws. So our international tax team has been working relentlessly to develop toolkits and tools that are going to facilitate the process and that are going to enable African countries to navigate their way through the complex maze of adopting GMTT legislation in their domestic laws. We have proposed a couple of models, actually 3 models, that can be used by these countries to incorporate the legislation into domestic laws. The first is the skeleton approach, which we believe is an appropriate approach for most of the countries, which basically incorporates the main provisions into the primary law, backed up by detailed regulations. There is a second, which is the referenced model, by which we simply advise countries that go for that model to incorporate the globe rules by way of reference into their local laws. And thirdly, we have adopted as well the long form version, which entails basically incorporating the full spectrum of rules into a primary legislation. So those are the key suggestions we've been making to respond to the challenge that we've identified. Now, broadly, we've been working with a couple of countries in Africa that have approached us on assistance relating to incorporation of these rules into their domestic laws, 9 countries in all. And we are very, very pleased with the progress that is made at that level and the interest that is progressively being gained across the continent on the global rules. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, very interesting on the global minimum tax. So now I invite Mercy for her perspectives.
Good day, colleagues. Once again, thank you to the OECD for giving us the opportunity to share our 2 cents about this very important topic, certainly around the two-pillar solution. I will make very brief remarks on the amount B and on the STTR in that respect. So starting with amount B, ETAF has been involved and has followed closely the work on amount B. And just to be in concurrence with our colleague Jorge, who came and commented on the same, we do believe that the transfer pricing rules could do with more streamlined and simplified approaches. Certainly, I will not repeat everything that he said, but it does go a long way in improving efficiency when it comes to application of transfer pricing rules. So many ETAF countries have reported that transfer pricing issues, particularly relating to distributive activities, are a major area of dispute, and certainly a very significant drain on much needed resources, certainly on more high-risk tax audits, certainly on other domestic revenue mobilization activities. And why this is a problem for us on the continent is typically our members are largely consumer markets. And so we see a lot of these distribution challenges that are BEPS risks on the continent. And that is why we do welcome this optional, simple, and streamlined approach, because we do feel, hopefully, once again, to the outcome that we hope will come from this, it will reduce the number of disputes and create greater tax certainty for both African tax administrations and business at large. So to this end, as ETAF, once again, as being part of this journey, and I'm glad hearing from other colleagues about the capacity building and the impactful engagements that have been happening for the last 2 to 3 years on this Pillar 2 solution. We have been involved with our members. We have been keeping them abreast of what this is. When Amount B came into the transfer pricing guidelines, we put out a technical note on Amount B just to inform our members on the rule design and what it implies on a policy perspective. And in terms of implementation, we went ahead to suggest how they can draft and incorporate this optional approach into the domestic law through our suggested approach to drafting transfer pricing legislation. So on a policy perspective, our members are well equipped. They do understand what Amount B means for them. They do have the option and the rule design on how to incorporate this in the domestic law. And so as a way forward for us, the work is cut out. It is exactly what has been articulated by other members. It is more technical assistance from member countries who have come forth to express interest on the same, more technical assistance on impact around Amount B on the distribution arrangements, and certainly working closely with the OECD and the information gathering framework that we know is coming up on the impact of how well this approach will be effective in curbing disputes in that space. So certainly we are looking forward and optimistic that this will help the continent. I think on the subject to tax rule, once again, fully in agreement with our colleague from Benin on the remarks that he made on the same. We do understand the rationale. There is a positive for source countries to pick up a tax to the agreed maximum of 9%. And this is assuming that is lowly taxed in the same. And so I think it is very important to do have a sense of the impact of the treaty network that our member countries do have and how much they are affected by this particular rule design and the implication of how much they had ceded when it comes to base eroding payments. And so once again, I think any rule always has to start with sound legislation. So as ETAF, we did put out an analysis of the OECD STTR showcasing the technical design of the same that covered everything that is in scope, the mechanisms, and ETAL. And once again, this is just to bring our members up to speed as to what this means, how this will be incorporated into your existing treaty network. So the mention of the MLI and how this can go into helping them cede and take back some of the ceded taxing rights. I think as a conclusion, once again, just like Amount B, our work as ETAF is cut out for us in the technical assistance of the design work, helping our members come up with policy reactions to the same, and certainly the implementation of the same. Thank you very much, Heike.
Thank you very much, Mercy. And yeah, I mean, I agree with you that there's still a lot of tools in terms of capacity building, technical assistance, and we really thank ETAF for all the efforts that you are putting into assisting African countries with the implementation. So I now come to Ms. Melanie Astuti from Indonesia. So as a representative from a G20 developing country, I was wondering what you think how the two-pillar solution fits into the broader questions of domestic resource mobilization and reaching the sustainable development goals.
Thank you, Haika. Thank you, Andrew. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen from Indonesia. Well, the government of Indonesia has implemented effectively the global minimum tax from the 1st January 2025. In addition to that, the government also signed the MLI on STTR on 19 September 2024 alongside 8 other jurisdictions. This move reinforces Indonesia's commitment to the global agreement. The implementation of the GMT has increased domestic resource mobilization in several ways. First, boosting tax revenue. Through the implementation of the global minimum tax, the government expects to increase tax revenue from the DNTT around 3.8 until 8.8 trillion rupiah. The DMTT and the IIR will take effect on the 1st January 2025, while the UTPR will be implemented effectively from the 1st January 2026. Second, curbing tax avoidance. The objective of the GloBE rules is to address the BEPS risk by ensuring that multinational enterprises pay a minimum level of tax, which is 15%. Third, enhancing transparency and accountability. The implementation of the rule is expected to strengthen the transparency and accountability in domestic tax system, fostering public trust and improving financial governance. Lastly, reducing the needs for ineffective tax incentives. As the global minimum tax put a floor on the corporate tax competition, which is 15%, the tax incentives that lower the ETR below the threshold will be less effective to attract investment. As a result, government no longer needs to provide ineffective and excessive tax incentives. Instead, the resources can be reallocated to support the development of the infrastructures, the enhancement of the ease of doing business, and fostering long-term economic growth. Similar to the GloBE rules, the implementation of the MLI on STTR will also enhance domestic resource mobilization. As Andrew has mentioned before, the STTR is aimed to prevent intragroup payment taking advantage of low CI2 rate in the recipient's jurisdiction. By granting rights for the source jurisdiction to impose tax of up to 9% on certain income that is taxed below 9% in the jurisdiction of the recipient. The Minister of Finance of Indonesia has signed the MLI on STTR, listing 29 the DTAs to be covered by the MLI. To ensure the effective implementation of the MLI, the ratification process is now underway and is expected to be finalized within 2 years. The implementation of the GNT and STTR aligns with the Sustainable Development Goals in various ways by increasing tax revenue, preventing tax avoidance, protecting the tax base, strengthening international tax cooperation, and enhancing transparency and accountability through the implementation of the global minimum tax and STTR. These measures are expected to create decent work and economic growth, reduce inequality, contribute to the peace, justice, and strong institution, as well as support the partnership for the goals. Ladies and gentlemen, for Indonesia, the implementation indeed may increase the domestic resource mobilization and support the sustainable development growth. However, this also presents several challenges, including the limited resources and IT system, the translation, the complexity, the business engagement. And the most challenging one is to design competitive and effective incentives with limited fiscal capacity. Developing countries should redesign the incentives to attract investment while maintaining competitiveness. Balancing these factors is very crucial for Indonesia to maximize the benefit of the global minimum tax while addressing the implementation challenge. That's all, Heike. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Melanie, for sharing Indonesia's experiences and also the challenges you see. So thank you so much, very insightful. And I also wanted to thank you for joining so late in the evening, because it's quite late in Indonesia right now. So thank you so much. And also special thanks, of course, to Jorge Santa Cruz, because for him it's quite early in Mexico. So thank you very much. Yeah, I think this first round was already very insightful. So we have heard about some challenges, and but also about some progress, some positive points, steps that have already been taken. And so in the next round now, we would like to hear a little bit more from the audience, because now the audience already got the input from the panelists. So now we would like to hear a little bit from the public. So we have prepared some polling questions. If the polling questions can please be launched now, so that the audience can participate in the polls. So everybody can now vote. So the first question is, I will just read, which of the recent international tax innovations will have the biggest impact for developing countries? Simplified transfer pricing approach, global minimum tax, or subject to tax rule? This is the first question. So we have already a good amount of replies. So maybe I can now move to the second question. What do you think are the biggest challenges for developing countries to implement those innovations? So what do you think are the biggest challenges for developing countries to implement those innovations? Political buy-in, human resources, or business engagement? So we have already received a lot of replies. Can we share the results? So for the first question, which of the recent tax innovations will have the biggest impact for developing countries? We see the global minimum tax is the winner with 55%, followed by simplified transfer pricing approach, and then the subject to tax rule. And on the second question, what do you think are the biggest challenges for developing countries to implement? We see that the biggest challenge is the political buy-in, followed by human resources, and then the business engagement. I would now like to ask the panelists to react to these polls, to these results. So maybe we can start with Melanie, since you are the last person to speak.
Thank you.
What do you think? What do you think of these results?
Yes. For the first question, I agree with the audience that the most, changes for the impact for the developing countries is global minimum tax compared to STTR and simplified transfer pricing approach, because we know that the global minimum tax has significantly changed the international tax system. We never had before the 15% minimum tax. We never had before. That's why the impact is very broad, especially for developing countries. We need to prepare our resource so we need a lot of funds and resources. So I agree for the first. And the second, I also agree that the most difficult one is political buy-in, because when we have to implement the rule, we have to increase the awareness of the stakeholders, the relevant ministries, especially the investment agencies, because they have they really want tax incentives to attract investment. That's why we have significant challenge in here. We have to convince the stakeholders that the tax incentives will be less effective, less attractive anymore post the Pillar 2 era. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Melanie, for this great comments. Mr. Jorge Santa Cruz, maybe you would like to comment as well? So
Thank
amount
you,
B
Heike.
is only on the second rank, so I don't know if you agree with that.
Yeah, no, I think I can make a statement on both questions. Regarding question one, I think the results are quite consistent with the most recent estimates made by the OECD on the economic impact of the two-pillar solution, which, if I remember correctly, they stated that low and middle income countries are the ones that are expected to gain the most, as a share of the corporate income tax revenue. So this result on the poll is consistent with that. And regarding question two, I mentioned one of the greatest challenges of developing countries tax administration is the human resource factor, and amount A and pillar 2 are quite technical approaches. So this is where the human resource factor has its impact. And the results are quite tied, between the political buy-in and the human resources. So, and I think the political buy-in is closely tied to the collection expectations. So, as probably as we see the rollout of the implementation on other countries and the collection results, the political buy-in will start rolling forward, I think. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jorge. So maybe would the ETAF colleagues like to comment as well?
Yes, I think I want to fully agree with Melanie's assessment, because the global minimum tax seems to be gaining a lot of traction, and with good reason. All right. The thing is, when you look at the QDMTT rules that are adopted, it helps quite a lot, with the minimum ETR of 15%. It helps a lot to eliminate the incentive, for multinationals to engage in very aggressive tax avoidance and evasion schemes. But besides that, it also helps the tax administrations and the countries as a whole, because it takes away the incentive to also engage in very unhealthy tax competition amongst the countries in terms of granting the incentives. On the second question, I think I would agree quite a lot with what Jorge Santajo said, because getting political buy-in for the GMT is not going to be easy. That is something we're already experiencing on the continent, especially given the fact that those that are not within the tax administrations are still stuck to the old ways, of attracting investment through incentives and the like, especially in the extractive sector. How do you get them to the point where they realize that those incentives, to a large extent, they'll be losing a lot of revenues, by granting those incentives in the extractive sector, especially given that some of the projects in the extractive sector are highly based on the economic viability of the projects themselves. At some point, you're compelled to grant those incentives. So I think the most important thing is the ability at this point to make sure that even if those incentives are granted, that you have those rules in place that would enable you as a backstop to, sort of capture any shortfalls below the 15% effective tax rate threshold. Now, on the human resource, there is no doubt that even the global minimum tax rules are so complicated and so complex, So at that level, I think a lot has to be done, to sort of beef up the capacity of tax administrations to first of all understand those rules and before even thinking of implementing them. So broadly, I think I agree with the assessment of participants with respect to one. I agree in part with their assessment relating to question 2, but also think the human resource component is an important one not to lose sight of. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for this assessment. So I think Andrew also wanted to make a comment.
Yes, has all the panelists have reacted? Sorry, I was
Not
looking at
yet. Not yet. Not yet.
Let the panelists go, and I just wanted to stress one thing at the end, but yeah, go ahead.
Okay, perfect. So maybe Mercy, if you can make a short comment, because we still have another question, and then Monsieur Alain Eude Assamasso.
Certainly, Heike, I will make mine very short, and I'll start off by saying fully endorse all the sentiments from my colleagues who I do agree with the poll. I am very interested to know the kind of mix that we have in the audience, because they do speak to exactly what we see. And not to repeat everything that Dr. Nya has said, for me and for ATAF, we do take this as feedback from our members as to what we need to concentrate on when it comes to the implementation phase of the 2-pillar solution. So the political buy-in is very loud, so we will concentrate on the policymakers and high-level engagements at the policy-making level. And we do know now what the audience gives a priority as that which will help domestic resource mobilization in their countries. So the polling questions were certainly very good for us as feedback in that sense. Thank you, Heike.
Thank you, that's very useful. Monsieur Alain Eude Assamasso, est-ce que vous souhaitez faire un commentaire aussi?
Merci.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much. I completely agree with the analysis that have been given, especially from our Indonesian colleague. I think that these are very important points. For the global minimum tax, Dr. mentioned the different aspects that are important for developing countries. There aren't that many businesses that fall within the scope of the global minimum tax. And for example, if I take the case of Benin, there aren't many businesses that would fall within the scope. Okay, for the second question now, we also believe that political buy-in is important, especially for developing countries, in order for us to attract investment. We have a lot of tax incentives, but we need reform of this. We need this scheme or this approach of giving tax incentives to be reformed. And this would mean changing our political approach and therefore get more political buy-in. Thank you very much.
So Andrew, would you like
Thank
to
you
make a
very
comment?
much.
Yeah, there was a comment in the chat about the STTR, and I know it came in third, but I just wanted to say something in its defense, and specifically that the subject to tax rule, first of all, was something that developing countries really pushed for in the negotiations on the 2-pillar solution, but also that it's the one part of the 2-pillar solution that is where inclusive framework members have committed to do it. The global minimum tax is a common approach. Amount B you can do or not do. Even amount A, you could sign a convention or not. With the STTR, if a developing country requests that it be put in a treaty that it has, then all inclusive framework members have committed to do that. And so, I think that's important. I think that that is an issue that developing countries are concerned with, and I think that as time goes on, we will see the impact and the uptake there of that provision. So, I just wanted to make that point. Thanks, Heike.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Yeah, it's true, and it's still early days for the STTR, so we hope that there will be bigger take up in the future. Yeah, so we had prepared another question. So unfortunately, we are running a bit out of time, but maybe if each panelist can be very short on the last question that we have, because afterwards there will be another session. So we don't want to be unfair for our colleagues. So the last question is for the panelists to describe in 1 minute, maybe it can be a bit shorter, what you see as the biggest change in the international tax landscape of the last 10 years. So maybe we can be very quick. So maybe, Jorge, would you like to start? Maybe just a keyword so we know what is for you the biggest change.
Thank you, Heike. Well, the BEPS reports, they celebrate precisely their 10th birthday this year. In this context, one major milestone was the recognition that BEPS was no longer solely a developing country's problem, but also of the developed world. Following this, and regarding transfer pricing is undoubtedly the most complex area in tax legislation. And in the past 10 years, transfer pricing remains consistently within the top 3 concerns for multinational entities. So linking this with the BEPS project, excluding Action 11, all other actions have a related party or transfer pricing component in varying degrees. This has had significant impact on the conceptual framework of transfer pricing, which has and still is shaping the tax landscape and legislations worldwide. We may recall that we have had 3 modifications to the transfer pricing in that period, if we count the amount be annexed to Chapter 4. And last but not least, we have to mention, of course, the BEPS implementation efforts worldwide. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jorge. Very interesting perspectives. And maybe Melanie, very quick, what is for you the biggest change?
Yeah, I think the biggest change is, of course, global minimum tax.
Yeah, thank you. Monsieur Assamasso, quel est le plus grand changement pour vous?
Le plus grand changement que je trouve, c'est l'élargissement du champ de
To
l'échange de
me, it's the
renseignements
extension of the
à
scope
travers la Convention
through the
sur l'assistance administrative fiscale MAC.
treaty
Puisque cette
of
convention permet
of the tax administration that
parler,
has allowed some
pouvoir
countries
lutter contre la fraude et l'évasion
to be able
fiscale.
to interact in order to fight fraud and tax
D'accord,
evasion.
merci beaucoup, très pertinent, Monsieur Assamasso. And I'm
Thank
turning
you,
now to the ETAF
Mr.
colleagues.
Assamasso.
Maybe
That was very
quick,
relevant.
Keywords. Dr. Zebong, what is the biggest change for you?
No, I think from my end, it's more or less an issue of the level of cooperation that you find internationally on issues of tax. Initially there was the tendency for states to take the issue of tax sovereignty too seriously. But under the weight of cross-border tax avoidance and evasion and the staggering levels of revenues they are losing, I think they've progressively moved away from this approach, and they are more or less embracing the new approach, which is collaboration on an international scale to resolve most of these issues. And I guess and see the adoption of the GMT as a revealing moment on the direction in which things are moving. So to me, it's the international cooperation and collaboration on tax issues that is the main change in the landscape over the past 10 years.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And Mercy, for you, what is the biggest change?
Certainly, I think all my points have been taken up, but just to emphasize, following Jorge's 10 impact outlook, I think on the continent, we have had major adoption of the transfer pricing regulations, including documentation requirements. We have had taking to on other BEPS risk solutions around interest deductibility, and certainly transparency frameworks like Dr. Nya has said that boost international cooperation. That being said, I think it is very important for us to have an impact assessment of the 10-year anniversary for the BEPS solutions. Thanks.
Yes, thank you very much. And we are certainly working on that, on the impact assessment of the 10 years anniversary. And yes, so I wanted to thank all the panelists. I think it was a really good group and was very insightful. Thank you very much for your participation and for sharing your honest perspectives. And so I think we have 2 minutes left for Andrew to wrap up for the last final statement, and then we hand over to our colleagues for the next session. But thank you very much to everybody. It was a real pleasure to have you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you to all of you who've participated, and for everybody online, and the questions we've had in the chat, and the really, I think, interesting discussion. I think we saw the full range of issues and concerns and challenges that are facing countries as they cope with the different aspects of the two-pillar solution, and not just the analytical challenge, but the human resource challenge, the political challenge. It really has changed the conversation in a lot of ways, and I think I'm hoping that the audience today has gotten a better sense of both what the two-pillar solution is about, what how it can impact developing countries, and how they're doing in terms of the that process of implementation. As Heike just mentioned, it is early days, but I think this is it's a new world in the sense in international tax and the collaborative approach that we've heard about. The polls were very interesting, and I think that's really showed, and the reactions from the panelists, because the diversity of the views there, and the ways that that they saw the international landscape really told a really, I think, interesting story. And again, also with the last question, I think we heard again very different views, and so I think that the audience was treated to I think a really good discussion. I learned a lot, and thank you all once again for participating and taking your time today, and again to our donors who have made the tax and development work possible. And so with that, I think we're now out of time. So thank you very much, and look forward to the next session.
Bye-bye.